I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Hello, everyone. You are listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, coming at you from a very stressed space. It's been a difficult start to 2023. Right after the show closed, 2 days later, I got COVID. I missed it for 3 years, and then it came for me for a vengeance. I remember I was sitting in the dressing room like the second week of the show, and I was like, I just want to be able to do the show. COVID can come for me after the show is done. And it seems that I was taken at my word because it did come, and it was not very gentle. I just realized like I really wanted to be able to do the show. I was able to do all 3 weekends, which I was very grateful for. And I was able to, I just wanted to be able, I loved my castmates so much for this show, and I just wanted to be able to hang out with them and do the show and discover new things with them. Shout out to any of my Miss Bennett castmates that may be listening. I already miss you, and it's only been a couple of weeks. But anyway, so that ended up happening. I ended up getting COVID. And then I got a mouse infestation in my apartment in the middle of COVID. And so I had to go stay at my boyfriend's, which is where I am currently. So apologies for any background noise. It's just a new and kind of unfamiliar recording space. But and he was testing negative while I was testing positive. And so, we were just sharing the same space, but not touching, wearing masks 24/7, even when sleeping. It was not great, not fun. And then, of course, the added stress with the mice and the work deadline that I've had looming. And then there's just been things here and there as well that have just happened and been little blips of stress and annoyance. But it's funny, I was just talking to somebody, actually a future guest of the podcast I was speaking to, and I was talking to her about how I'm really confident with how I handle emotional stress. I have a lot of faith in myself that I can get through it. I know that it might suck. But, I've been through some pretty difficult breakups. I've been through some pretty difficult friend losses. I have a mom who has terminal cancer. I've had other shitty things happen to me in my emotional life. And I have a lot of faith in myself and in my ability to handle them and to be resilient and to come out stronger. But a lot of the stress that I'm dealing with right now, in addition to, the COVID and the mice and, not being in my own space, etc., is work related. It's professional related. And just having a very difficult situation with my self-confidence being affected and, that exacerbating the stress that I already feel. So it's been a time, basically, but I am finally releasing this episode, albeit a few days late. Before we get to that, though, I wanted to follow up on the conversation that we started in the last intro for the last episode, and that's about the app Spicer. And I did mention that, my partner and I have been trying it, and it is something that we continued to kind of experiment with. It was just kind of a fun thing to do when we, were sitting across from each other, in a room, not being able to touch, maintaining distance. It was kind of a fun thing to be able to interact on this app that was about intimacy. And kind of, we talked about how it worked before, but I'll kind of go over it again. In the app, there are options that come up every day. Let's say like, I think one a few days ago was like suck on your partner's toes, which for the record, is not for me. Nor do I want my toes sucked. It's not for me. But, that was an option that came up, and I was able to say whether it was a yes, a no, or a maybe. In the past, I've talked about my stoplight analogy. Is this sexual act? Is it a red? Oh, there are those noises that I mentioned. He lives in a busier road than I do. But, you're able to say, is it a yes? Is it a maybe? Or is it a no? And once you've matched, there is a column that says yes, the things that you've matched yes on. There's a column that says maybe, the things that you've matched maybe on. And it gives you the option to go into a chat room to discuss these things. So maybe if you and your partner are a little less comfortable discussing these things in person, it gives you a safe place to be able to just focus on this one particular act. So like something came up and I messaged my partner and I was like, this is a hell yes for me. This would be fun. And he responded saying hell yeah or whatever. And it just kind of gives you that space to be able to talk about each of these individual things. Now, my biggest complaint is still that I can't really see what we don't agree on. So, my partner, I've had to kind of show our phones to each other and see oh yeah, I said yes to this, you said no to this. And maybe that's intentional. Maybe there are couples out there who that could be the source of fights, or it could cause some stress or some tension in the relationship. But for me, I'm genuinely just curious. I want to know, why my partner said, no to that particular act. Even if I myself said no to it, I want to talk about why that doesn't work for him, why that doesn't work for me, and to see if there's a reason, or if it's just a simple explanation of, yeah, that's just not something I'm interested in. I really value curiosity. And so, I understand, at base, why there's not a no section, but I personally kind of wish that there was one. But yeah, give it a shot. I mean, there's lots of really interesting things that have come up that I personally never would have even thought of. But it's kind of been cool to see what my partner thinks of them, and for me to look at how I feel about them. And it's an interesting way to get to know you and your partner better, and to kind of get a little bit creative with your sexual life. So check it out, Spicer. It kind of sounded like an ad read. They're not a sponsor, but they could be if they wanted to be. Shout out, Spicer. I'm going to tag you on the social media for this episode. But let's get into the episode. My guest for today is Mireille, and I am super excited for you to learn from her. We talk about love after divorce. We talk about the process of potentially leaving a relationship, and what that looks like. We talk about how to rediscover yourself after a relationship. And how to really get in touch with what you want and what you value, so that when you do ultimately decide to get back out there, you know what you're looking for, and you can, spot any things that come up that might not align with your values. So, yeah, it was a really interesting conversation. We talked also about the nuances between self-love, self-worth, and self-care, all of how they overlap and the different ways in which they don't. And so that was a really fascinating point of our conversation too. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm excited to jump into it. So after a quick commercial break, please enjoy my conversation with Mireille.
What is it, honey?
It's that darn ghost again. He just won't leave us alone. I guess we're just going to have to move.
No, wait. Don't worry. We're not moving. He is.
Who are you going to call?
Blockbusters. Actually, we know nothing about catching ghosts other than what we saw in that old cartoon. But if you want a podcast where we talk about film, TV, random tangents that leave you wondering what the hell was that all about, and the occasional nugget of wisdom, then we're the ones for you. And if you act now, you can listen to our entire back catalogue for free.
Did you say free?
Yes, I did. So go now to your nearest podcatching device, shake off the ectoplasm, and download us today. Warning, listening to Blowbusters can lead to stomach cramps from laughing, headaches from attempting to remember what tangent they went on this time, and a worn-out section of your device's screen/keyboard as you smash the replay button over and over until the next episode arrives. If your Blowbusters episode lasts longer than 4 hours, tell your doctor so he can listen as well.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am super excited to introduce my guest for this week, Mireille. How are you doing today? I'm excited to get started.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited. It's been a while actually since I've been on a podcast. Usually I'm not the one in the hot seat. So I'm really,
It's
really excited.
different. It's different when you like get switched up. You're like, oh, like I have to like say interesting things now and be profound.
Exactly.
So I feel that. Well, let's start kind of there. Go ahead and take a few minutes. Tell me and the listeners a little bit about you, your story, and how you kind of came to be involved in this work, and kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. So my name is Mireille. I actually go by Mireille Nicole in my relationship coaching business. And I actually call myself a love after divorce coach and a relationship strategist. And as you hear my story, you'll kind of understand why it came to that. But if I go back in terms of, what led me down this path, I mean, growing up, I was always obsessed with love and romance. I wasn't so much the girl that dreamed about her wedding so much growing up, but I always had this deep feeling of what I was looking for and how to feel in a relationship. So that was always kind of, yeah, really. And you know what's funny though, speaking the same way? So one of the things I was obsessed with growing up is the BBC series Pride and Prejudice. And I was just looking on your profile.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this podcast was meant to be because you were part of this play. Was it called Miss Bennet?
Miss Bennet, Christmas at Pemberley. Yeah, I play Jane once she's married off to Mr. Bingley. Oh, that's so funny. I'd have, I mentioned to people, I'm like, Pride and Prejudice is so sexy. Why is it so sexy? And then I was like, it's all like nice manners and repression. Like, that's what it is.
It's so true.
But anyway.
So, all my life, I was looking for my Mr. Darcy. So, I mean, growing up, I lived kind of a typical teenager life, had relationships here and there, but you know what? I was really never the girl who was always in this long-term relationship. So, I met people, and that's kind of relevant because later on, I finally found a man and I got married. So I started off first, getting married, and then that kind of didn't turn out. So wasn't my Mr. Darcy, didn't turn out to be my happily ever after. And I found myself to be divorced. So I had a struggle, keeping those relationships. And you're going to say, well, oh my goodness, you're like a relationship coach. Why would, women come to
I would
me
never say that.
relationship coaching? Well, I'm going to put it out there, but thank you. But what I learned is that, what I could see in hindsight is that I was really missing a lot of the skills and the tools to make these relationships work and to have this, fairy tale ending, Pride and Prejudice ending, in terms of my love life. And after my marriage ended, I actually did end up finding and attracting my soulmate. So I'm super happy for that. But once I was in the relationship with him, things started to get rocky again. And I started, it started breaking down a little bit. So I was really noticing this pattern. And one day I decided, I'm going to, take a step back and I'm going to see what's going on here and I'm going to fix it. I'm going to figure out, how to have this romance I've always desired. And it's really when I started learning all about self-love, which I know you are all about, understanding how men work, also developing my relationship skills that hopefully we can talk a little bit about during the podcast, and becoming like magnetic, like Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Darcy in the series, that everything changed, right? And I was able to turn this relationship, and finally we ended up getting married. So we went from a relationship that started getting rocky, even though it's my soulmate, to finally now we're in that relationship. So
yeah,
I come from that perspective too. So I'm not that person that relationship coach where everything was perfect and I found the right person, right? I really had to work at it. So I really, am drawn to women who want to overcome these challenges. And I can come from a place where I not only know about it now, but I've experienced it myself. So I've been there. I feel you.
Absolutely. And it's so funny. Like, I interview a ton of people and everybody has a story, and I think that's what makes people good relationship coaches or good sex coaches or, whatever their expertise might be. It's because they have a personal experience that makes them be able to empathize and relate to the people that they are coaching.
Absolutely.
And, it's funny too, like what you were just saying was about, having the tools. It reminded me of something that I talked with my partner about very early on because, as I think I mentioned to you, I had a very long-term relation. I'm 32. I had a very long-term relationship end when I was 31, and it broke me in almost every sense of the word. But from it, I've learned a lot. And one of the main things that I learned is that some people view love as a feeling and other people view love as a choice. And I was with somebody who viewed it as a feeling. And when those good feelings, when it got rocky and those good feelings went away, he was done. Whereas I have always viewed love as a choice. Those feelings aren't going to be around forever. It's going to get rocky. But what makes real love real is that you are waking up and choosing it each and every day. And I have a suspicion, I'm not sure if it's true, but I would imagine that it is, that's kind of one of the things that you explore. I mean, would you agree with that in healthy relationships that last, love is more of a choice?
I definitely agree that it gets to the stage where it does become a choice, right? Because life comes in and you get just challenges from either work or just your social life and just, growing up in general together, right?
Absolutely.
So it definitely gets to a point where there's a choice. I think a lot of times one of the really interesting relationship, theories that really stuck with me is that a lot of times a predictor of what's going to happen in a relationship happens in the earlier on. So we always talk, about this honeymoon phase, and at the beginning, everything, like all the feelings are there. But after a while, especially if you don't have all the tools, all the skills, and you don't make that choice, that can go away after a while.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit, in the beginning, we're all swayed, we're all wrapped up in those beautiful emotions, but to make it last, there's definitely a choice that comes in there. And I think even after you make that choice, and to work on it and to get those skills, you can actually get those emotions back. So I think you can
absolutely
satisfy both partners at the end of the day when you do it correctly.
Yeah, it's kind of like a feedback loop, right? Like when you make the choice every day, it makes your partner feel valued, and it makes them feel like you value their relationship, which makes them feel fuzzy feelings towards you. So it kind of furthers that honeymoon phase, the harder that you work at it and the more that you show up with that intention.
So true. That feedback loop is so important. And I mean, what happens a lot of times is people get into the negative feedback loop instead of the positive. So when we can get unstuck out of that and create that positive feedback loop, that's when you really, strike gold in a relationship.
Definitely. So I kind of want to follow like the advice and the coaching that you do kind of through the timeline of like your experience. So how old were you when you got married, and how old were you when you ended up getting divorced?
So when I got married, I was about 27, 28. And then I was divorced at 34, 35. So that's one of the things I talk a lot. Like I follow quite kind of the trajectory. I was seeing, in my early 20s, everyone was, all my friends were getting married and meeting the one and everything. And a lot of my decisions were very much influenced on that. Like I was saying earlier on, I was really, I really had this idea in my head, not just the idea, the feeling in my body of how I wanted my relationship to be. But the dating scene and everything was quite interesting. But I ended up finding someone quite, at the typical age, I'd say, of all my friends anyways, and got married. And then it just didn't work out. So mid-30s, I kind of found myself starting over again.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? Absolutely. Yeah. Well, like what are some of the things that, what are some of the effects that such a heartbreaking loss, and this goes for you and it also goes for, the people that you coach, what are some things that you have seen? How does such a heartbreaking loss and the end of a marriage, it makes you have to, like you said, start over? What does that look like for people? Because you have to heal before you can get back out there, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things I see happen a lot of times, and I know this happened for myself too, is that we often lose ourselves in a relationship. And we, when we're with this other person and we start a life together, we really create an identity with that, with our love life and with who we are in the relationship with our partner. Maybe we start having children, we become parents, and we start identifying with all these different aspects of our relationship. So sometimes, this is totally unintentional, subconscious. It just creeps up on us. And we don't even, unless we're very intentional, this can happen. And then what happens is when there's a breakup, when there's a separation, when there's a divorce, we don't know who we are anymore. And I felt that myself too. I like to tell the story about how after my divorce, I was just driving around in my car. And then all of a sudden I started playing this music that was, my kind of music that I wasn't listening to anymore when I was in my marriage. Like I had totally even changed the type of music I was listening to. And, that day I had started wearing clothes. It came to me, I realized I was wearing clothes more like who I really was. It was my style again. And I had totally, like, you listen to this now and you're like, of course, like, why would you do that? But it totally crept up on me in my relationship. I was kind of, conforming and just kind of becoming one with this new life with this other person. And that's fine. You definitely want that. But that was just a pivotal moment for me where I could clearly see how I had lost like parts of me in the relationship. Right. And when that was gone at the beginning, I didn't know who I was. And then when I had that realization, that was definitely one of the things that, helped me heal and come out on the other side. So that's definitely one of the things that I work with women is finding themselves again after they come out of the relationship, and also just the feelings, right? It's working through those feelings after the breakup, separation, divorce. They can bring up feelings of embarrassment. You might feel a bit humiliated depending on what happened, what the circumstances were. And that's totally going to impact your self-worth. So I know some of the things just in the notes that we talked about before, you were talking a lot about self-worth, right? But one of the things I want to tell the ladies listening, and that came up, I think, in my story a little bit, is that your love life doesn't have to look like anyone else's love life, right? Like I kind of followed the typical journey. Then we split up. I found my soulmate later on in life. It took a divorce. Now we're married. Now we have a crazy blended family together. And it's just like its own beautiful mess. So in the moment when there's a separation, a breakup, it can seem really hard, but part of it is also, trusting in the possibilities that continue to be there, and they might look different for you, but they can just be as beautiful.
Yeah, giving yourself to just release any expectation, because I found that the biggest periods of growth in my life came after like something devastating happened, right?
Yeah.
And like you always are at the end of it, you're like, wow, that really sucked, but like, holy shit, am I a better person for it? So let's kind of talk about that, going a little bit further into that. Can you talk about that link between rejection and self-worth and how those play into each other, and how kind of people can resist that urge to be hard on themselves after some sort of rejection?
Yeah, one of the things I see too when it comes to self-worth and rejection is that it kind of comes back to the idea where I was talking about, where you kind of create that self of identity in the relationship. And then when there's that break, you kind of also take it personally at the same time. And that's where it can impact your self-worth. You might have created, saw a lot of the value that you brought to the world, let's just say, kind of in that what you were bringing into that relationship. And so when there's that divorce or breakup, it's really a matter of, again, finding yourself. And then one of the things I like to do with women to kind of help with that, and I'm thinking self-worth, when I think about self-worth, oftentimes I kind of interweave it also with self-love for myself. Like I see the connection there. And so it's about really, taking time to kind of sit with yourself and really explore all the things that you brought even before the relationship, which can be really helpful too, right? So if you find yourself, you got lost in it, you're not sure who you are, you can go back. One of the exercises I do with women is to really go back and write down the things that make you unique, the things that you love to do, the things that, you've achieved in the past, again, to get kind of that sense of who you are again and the value that you bring. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I guess that's an interesting question too. Like there's like self-love and self-worth, they're so connected. I always kind of think that like self-love is like loving yourself unapologetically and without any strings attached, right? Like unconditional love. even when you're on your worst day, for example. Whereas self-worth is like being able to look at like the things that you've done and the things that you give and the things that you bring to the world. And there's so much interplay between the two of them. But I guess I never really thought about the differences.
Oh yeah, and then throw in that self-care, which you hear a lot of talk about, right? And again, that I see that as playing into those other two elements, and the level of self-care that you provide to yourself and that you commit to and you're willing to do is often going to be related to the amount of self-love and self-worth that you feel, right? The more self-love, the more you will take care of those different aspects of your life. So when I talk about self-care, the way I describe self-care, it's not just, bubble baths and a glass of wine, like self-care is really taking responsibility for your emotions. It's taking responsibility for your finances, for your health, for your spirituality, like all those holistic aspects that, make a fulfilled life. So the more self-love you feel, the more self-worth, the more you can take even greater responsibility, beyond the bubble baths. You're going to, like you noted, I'm really big on health and exercise and nutrition too, right? You'll take it up a notch. The more you grow your self-love, the more you're going to rise in those different areas too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's like one of my next questions is you have a focus on exercise, healthy eating. You just have a lot of YouTube videos on really interesting topics that like maybe at first glance you'd be like, oh, is this like a health channel? And then you're like, no, like this plays into like this holistic view of being a healthy, well-rounded person. So how does this kind of is parts of two of my questions, because one of my questions is what are some of those baby steps that women can take early on in that healing process? And I think you kind of just nailed it by talking about self-care and just kind of take a second to like talk about how those small things that maybe we don't view as helping us along in the process, exercise, healthy eating, etc. How do those play into the healing process and into that self-care, self-worth, self-love?
Yeah, well, I'll say like even before I get into like the health and the exercise nutrition part, like one of the early steps I say to heal, like in addition to and kind of while you're, finding again your worth and your self-love, is to really start feeling your emotions. And, a lot of times we try to avoid our emotions, or even in the relationship, right? If we were struggling in the relationship, sometimes we, try to shut down, we were in survival mode. Sometimes we feel like, no, Mireille, like I'm really connected to my emotions. Like I was freaking out in the relationship, or I was really, emotional, really sad, really disappointed. But a lot of times we think we're connected to our emotions, but they have a handle on us. So when I say connected to your emotion, we're not, riding the wave. We're like steering the ship, like over the wave. So one of the early things along with the self-love is really learning to feel into your emotions, become comfortable with your emotions, kind of, start self-soothing yourself, self-nurturing yourself with these emotions. Because at the beginning, after the breakup, you're going to be very sensitive to things still. So the more you can start really getting to be familiar with your emotions, just, honoring them, they're there, it's okay to feel them, and start carrying them with you into your life, the better you're going to do just for yourself on your own and in that next relationship, if that's what you desire. And I find a good way also to kind of support this work of doing the self-love and the rediscovering yourself and also managing the emotions is through exercise and nutrition. But I mean, first off, we know that's going to be beneficial in the sense that the more you exercise, the more you have those feel-good hormones. You've got the oxytocin. So there's like a biological reason, even like biochemistry, why you want to do that and to help you navigate through these emotions, because it does release certain chemicals. And even with the nutrition, right? Like the better you eat, the healthier the foods, the more I'm getting a bit, woo maybe with this. I mean, there's a lot of talk about good. But, they say different foods have different vibrational energies. So the more you can eat, those fruits, those vegetables, all those foods you're supposed to eat more of, right? The more there is actually, a vibrational, energetic reason to eat those foods. And I always say, like, when it comes to health, nutrition, diet. I mean, it's not to get really strict about it, but this is a great way for you to increase your self-care. Again, practice, show yourself love, and also just to set even relationship skills. Things like when you go back into your next relationship, or maybe you're still in a relationship and you're kind of working on it, but like things like boundaries, things, these are things you can practice in terms of setting boundaries with yourself to go to the gym. And then you keep your word to yourself. And then that raises your self-confidence, right? And then as you implement these boundaries with yourself, you become stronger and more confident implementing boundaries with other people and a future partner. And the food's not going to talk back to you. The gym's not going to yell at you. So, it's kind of a great way to kind of start doing these habits or these skills that will benefit you after in other areas of your life.
Definitely. It's almost like if you can be disciplined with yourself, you're going to be better able to set boundaries in your relationships with other people.
Because you already have got your back.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I've never really thought about that before. I'm so into like emotional well-being, and I'm so awful at like eating healthy or exercising. And I'm just like, that was a big thing for 2021. I was like, or 2020, I don't know what year we're in anymore. 2023, I was like, Rachel, we need to drink more water. If we can end 2023 having more water in our system, will be good. Okay, so once a lot of healing and processing has taken place, and now it is important to mention, this is something that I only learned recently, that there is only so much healing that you can do on your own. And part of the healing process has to be done in relationship to other people, which I, discovered in the last few months in my new relationship.
Yeah.
Just being like, there are some things that, I'm still healing from and still learning from. And, luckily I have a wonderful and patient partner who understands that and doesn't, take it personally or anything. But when people are ready to get out there, whether they're quote unquote fully healed or not, what pieces of advice for them do you have for them? How do you coach them through that process?
Well, first, I want to take it back to what you just mentioned about not being fully healed, because I'm a huge advocate of that also. And just on social media, I see a lot of women who sometimes get really stuck in that whole healing loop. It's become like almost like a buzzword. And I don't want to diminish it by calling it a buzzword, but, a lot of women talk about, the healing and the healing and the healing. And I feel like that can be almost a vicious trap if you're not careful with it, because same as you, right? I totally relate to that, because when I attracted my soulmate after divorce, like I wasn't healed. I wasn't healed at all. There's some of these steps that I guide women through earlier on that I had done. So I think there has to be some sort of, foundation, but I just want to reiterate what you said, or just add to what you said, to remove some of that pressure, because I feel like there's a lot of pressure on women to kind of do all that healing work. And what does that even mean, right? It's almost like an elusive term.
I think that it's difficult, right? Because you don't want to jump out and start dating too soon without doing any of that healing work, right? But you also can get stuck, I think, in that healing process, or putting pressure on yourself that you're not fully healed. And again, sometimes the best way to quote unquote finish off that healing process, or to, continue on that journey, I guess that's a better way of putting it, is to be in relationship with others.
Absolutely.
So it's a delicate balance.
It's totally a delicate balance. And I think some of the things I talked about would be some of the early work to do, before dating, or just try to get a grasp on it, right? Especially kind of the emotions. Again, a lot of times, you're going to be, like I said, extra sensitive, the first time. And some women I see, or then I talk to and they work with me, will be like, okay, like that first breakup after you've dated someone for the first time after divorce is going to be super hard. So again, it's kind of working with those kind of the sense of self, the self-love, and working on the emotions. But one of the things I help women with and try to, get them to start implementing is we work on removing the focus being on the man and kind of the date and the other person, and really start bringing the focus back on ourselves, right? So when they're talking to, this potential partner, really focusing on kind of implementing either the emotional skills that that I talk to them about, those relationship skills, so that no matter what happens with a guy, right? If he turns out to not be, their type, or he doesn't ask for the second date right away, it doesn't matter so much. The focus is removed from that is the outcome to the focus being, for example, one of the things I encourage the women to do is to really, before the date, their first date with this new man, they do something that makes them really happy, something that puts them in the vibe, that makes them feel, really good about themselves. And the work is to go into that date and carry that feeling with them. So again, regardless of what happens, the achievement is in terms of them carrying that feeling into the date. Or if it's not the first date, maybe a skill we'll work on is just being in their feminine. And I mean, I get more specific when I work with the women, but I give them like one task, one action item to do in their feminine, and the focus becomes that, right? And then no matter what happens, you celebrate yourself.
Right.
You celebrate that achievement.
Yeah, it's just, there's so much focus, it feels like, on, oh, I hope he likes me. And I remember when I first had the thought, wait a minute, I should be wondering if I like him. Like, that's what this is about. It doesn't really matter if he likes me. I should be more focused on if I like him.
Yes.
I think that is a very important piece of information, that to take away that person and the importance of, oh, I hope this person likes me, or, oh, I hope, and be like, wait a minute, like, how do I feel about this situation? And I do like that advice too, of taking that energy of joy with you, because you're only going to radiate as your best self, if you have that background.
And that's going to be super attractive to the man too, right? Like if he sees that you're like a happy person and you're enjoying life, he's going to, that's very magnetic to the men. And also like he's going to, and this is kind of funny, but take it for what it is. Like if you're all happy during the date and whatnot, he's going to like take some of the credit for himself. He's going to think, she's really enjoying herself. I'm really doing a good job here, and that helps him too. That raises his testosterone and just, adds to the date. So
because men do need to feel, desired and like they need to feel helpful. They like to feel good about themselves, and they don't get compliments very frequently. So they have to, look for those signals where they can, because they don't get that as frequently.
No, that's so true. And you were talking also, like I wanted to, because I feel like I haven't addressed that yet, but when you were talking about, doing some of the healing work in the relationship, and that is, that's definitely true. There's just so much you're going to be able to experience on your own, or so much work that you're going to be able to do on your own until you get into that next relationship. And even like beyond that, one of the beautiful things about being in a relationship with someone else is, helping each other grow, right? And healing things together and being there for one another too. So, it's never about underestimating that power too of being in the relationship and working on those things together. I mean, me and my husband now, we've been together quite a while now, and we're still doing a lot of healing work. There's still healing work to do. And just from going through these moments together, it just increases even the satisfaction in our relationship at the same time. Absolutely.
No, so well said. I agree entirely. I mean, I couldn't even follow up on that if I wanted to. I guess to broaden it a little bit, just outside of people you've worked with, your own experiences, stories that you've heard, what are some tips that you have for the dating process? Just general red flags or green flags that you've noticed. And this can be in the context of, after a breakup, after divorce, or not, kind of just as a general, relationship coach. What are some things that you've noticed that people should be looking for?
Well, one of the other things, bringing it back to self-love again, is that I think the more self-love that you have, the more you do the self-care, the more you feel the self-worth, and you realize that you really have your back, and you start trusting in yourself, feeling more confidence. What's going to happen is your intuition is going to get a lot better too. So like when we talk about red flags and green flags in relationships, like I always, some of that is going to be just from doing the work. The woman's going to go out there and she's going to she's going to feel that too. So I hate kind of identifying certain things, because I think part of it, when it comes to those green flags, red flags, is going to be partly your intuition and from the work you do together. And also sometimes it's going to be, as you're going to see it as a result of the skills, because there's going to be red flags because some men are just, or some people, I should say, I should just say men, but some people are just
women.
Yeah, exactly. I won't. Well, I guess people throw out the term narcissist all the time, right? Like I'll just use that. There's just
That's
some people
a pet peeve
who are.
Of mine.
Yeah, me too, a little bit. So there's going to be, kind of just people who are narcissistic. Let's just say whatever. But sometimes, you'll really see the flags when you're doing the work and the relationship skills and really coming back to your intuition. So I almost feel like, again, I hate to put the focus on just the behavior or just the other person. I always bring it back to kind of how you're showing up. And I'm not saying that in the sense that, the blame is always your fault and, it's on you. I'm saying it from a place of empowerment. In terms of deal breaker, that's one of the things too that we work on, right? So before the work I do with clients, before they go out dating, it's going to be to look at goals, right? What are your goals? What's your vision in terms of the next relationship or the relationship you truly desire? And then you look at the flags from that. There are obvious flags, any of the 3 A's that you can spot earlier on, right?
Yes.
Abuse, addiction, adultery. Some of those things, you won't see them right at the beginning, but those are obviously going to be some of the big flags. But other things would be not harder to see, but I always say, work on the skills, really work on your self-love and your intuition. And then, measure that up against the standards, the goals that you set for yourself and go from there. So I hate to just say distinct things. So sorry,
no, I understand
that directly, but it's more nuanced.
Yes. It's so funny too. You were saying these things and I was like, I feel like I was just like reading something or like listening to something like that was kind of talking about today. And then like it hit me that I was watching your YouTube video about the 3rd season of Love is Blind, which I actually just finished last week. And, so spoilers for, season 3 of Love is Blind, but you were talking about the relationship between Zeneb and Cole. And, you kept saying, I'm only going to focus on Zeneb. There are obviously issues on the other side of this, but because I work with women and because, you can only control, it was really a fascinating thing. And I found that particular dynamic in the season interesting because my overall, I guess, analysis of the situation is that like he's just a young puppy who like doesn't understand how to be sensitive to people's feelings, and that she, had some, I don't want to say control issues, but she liked things a particular way and had no issue nitpicking. And then I looked up her zodiac sign and I was like, of course she's an Aries. But yeah, you were just saying that and I was like, where did I hear this? And I was like, oh, I literally was listening to you earlier talk about this same idea.
Because we can just call certain things out, right? And it's easy to just spot certain characteristics of people, but sometimes a lot of times too it can be the dynamic in the relationship. And I don't know if you've experienced this. I know personally I've experienced this where when I was just with certain people, like we just brought out the worst in each other,
right?
And there are definitely skills and tools and approaches we could have tried, and maybe that would have helped a little bit. But again, to just really label ourselves based on those characteristics in a particular dynamic, having done work on it or not, it's just, I'm just always very cautious and
sure
prefer to see it as nuanced, like I said. So.
It's that same idea of like, you can call out different things in a dynamic in the other person, but at the end of the day, what good is that really going to do you moving forward? There's a lot of self-reflection work. And, I've been thinking a lot about, accountability over the last couple of years. And at the end of the day, only you can control what you can do. You can't control what other people do. So I think that's important too in the context of, like you were saying, in dating, being more in touch with yourself is going to help you to pick up the things in other people, because everybody's different.
Yeah.
With that in mind, if people are going out and dating and trying to, get in better touch with themselves so that they can have a stronger sense of intuition, what are some practical steps that people can take towards cultivating a stronger sense of self-love, self-care, self-worth, etc.? I mean, I know that we've talked about, holistic living, but let's talk about kind of mindset. What are some shifts that people can make mentally and emotionally that are in their control, so that, when they are going back out there in the world to seek love, or maybe not, so that they feel a little bit stronger in their sense of self?
Yeah, well, I think I'm just bringing back a few points that we have covered, but I think it's worth reiterating. But even from the mindset part, and we talked a little bit about, right, just removing the focus, putting the focus back on yourself, and even actually this is just reminding me of actually something I was going to say. It's coming back to me now. I was just seeing something recently, and the person said it so well, where, and it's coming back to this idea of where we were talking about narcissists. And the person was talking about how, a person can be narcissistic or a person can have narcissistic tendencies.
Yes.
And that there's a big difference there.
Yes.
Again, that's kind of what's coming out of the dynamic with the other person. So I always encourage, if something, like I said earlier, if something's really a red flag, obvious, no right away, but there's always that possibility. You just really want to weed them out. And that helps with your intuition too, right? When you have the skills and you can kind of really identify if that's based on the dynamic or the behavior, or if that's really, really the person. But I'm going off track again, sorry, because that just came back to me. So
no
really,
worries.
The mindset, again, just from kind of peeling the attention off the man and bringing it back on you. Again, doing kind of the work about when it comes to remembering who you are also, and really focusing on those emotions, like I said earlier, really to, and also, do you know what, remembering who you are and finding yourself again after is going to help you just in the context of meeting the next person too.
Absolutely.
So if if you start doing those activities that you've always loved to do, that's an opportunity for you to meet more people who have those interests too, right? So a lot of people we're all stuck online on these apps and everything. And I mean, I know a lot of people for who that totally works, and that's perfect. But if you're someone who wants to explore all avenues, or you're not comfortable, or you're taking a break from that, finding who you are again and doing those activities is also a great place to meet people, even if it's just for friendship also too, right?
Right. Which are very, very fulfilling relationships in addition to romantic.
Absolutely. One of the things too, actually, it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of times too, when we're in our relationship that might not work out after, we tend to put a lot of focus or a lot of expectations on that relationship. And I know that's something that I had to kind of unlearn for myself. And this is part of I was just doing more research on the subject a while ago, and I was listening to a really interesting talk about how the modern relationship has changed nowadays. And, back in the day, and I mean, this is sounding maybe old fashioned and cliche or even sexist, and we've moved past that because we're progressive, right? But back in the day, relationships had very clearly defined roles.
Yes.
There was an expectation of the man, there was an expectation of the woman. Whereas nowadays, it's we have all this choice, all these options. And I mean, have we really evolved to that point yet, right? What happens, what it created is that we have all this choice, and now we have all this negotiating in the relationship. Either one of us can be a breadwinner, either one of us can, take care of the house. And so there's a lot more at play in terms of communicating. It's a lot less less straightforward. And so there's a lot of expectation in terms of what our partner can be. And even just from now, there's this expectation also that our partner's kind of everything to us, or a lot, right? So that's something that happened to me, where I had to start looking out at my friendships again too. So when you were talking about how other relationships are important, they are, right? Because your man might not always be, or your partner always be, the one who you vent to, or, you just, you can have a good friend. Yeah. It's a lot of pressure for one person to fulfill all your needs. So when you can also go out and extend those relationships and remove pressure from that one person, I mean, the relationship's going to benefit.
Yeah, everybody does, right? Because you're cultivating relationships with friends. Friends feel like you count on them. That makes them want to count on you. That enriches that relationship, and it also, I mean, no one wants to be with somebody who makes them their world. Well, no, healthy person anyway, I suppose.
The narcissist, maybe, Rachel, right?
the abuser, maybe.
Yeah.
But this kind of brings me back to this idea that you said, bringing the focus back to oneself and what, you can control and how to, maybe not how you can better yourself, but my brain, because I'm always about like self-improvement, I want to be better, but that can go too far in one direction, right? So I'm one of those people who so like, let's say that there's a issue with a person, and there's like a friend in a friendship or something. I am always very ready to take responsibility, even if it's not mine to take responsibility for. So how do you kind of weigh that, balance that to make sure that, you're putting the attention back on yourself and what you can control and, everything. How do you balance that with, the fact that you can't take on all responsibility for 100% of things? Because as we've said, things are usually more nuanced.
Yes, for sure. That can be, a trap for a lot of us. I'm like you. I'm really into this whole personal development. And actually, that's a very feminine energy trait to like work on ourselves too. So, that's why a lot of women kind of face kind of that challenge. And I think the best piece of advice I can give for that, or the best way to kind of judge that for yourself, again, comes back to when I was talking earlier about reconnecting with your feelings and even your nervous system, like in general, even physically, when I'm talking about your emotions, like feeling into your body too, because I think your body leaves, like, it talks to you all the time. It leaves the clues. So it's going to be really a matter of listening to yourself. Do you find like in that relationship or in your efforts to try to, to make it better or to improve it, like how's that feeling internally to you? And I know there's going to be discomfort in growth and, in a relationship with another person, but, when you've started doing kind of this work for yourself and regulating your emotions and whatnot, you're still going to feel that clue. There's going to be kind of like you're going to feel it as you're getting closer to the tipping point. So it's really about listening to yourself, really keeping the focus, staying grounded in your body too. So a lot of the work I do too is just, somatic, working with the body, because you can feel it. And if we get too wrapped up in our heads and, trying to be all academic about it, we lose touch with what's going on inside of us. And that's when we're not feeling our inner compass anymore, or intuition anymore, when there's that disconnect. So it's really working towards having that good connection with yourself too.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's it, like we said, it's a tricky balance because I do find that I'm so ready to take on all responsibility. Like if someone tells me that I hurt their feelings, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, and I take it all on. Or if somebody tells me like, the end of a relationship or the end of a friendship is my fault, I'm like, yes, you are 100% right. I own that. Like when maybe it's more balanced than that person would like to believe. But that's part of accountability, and that's a whole other topic, I suppose. But
and balance is a key word, right? That you said there too. It's finding that balance and not taking on everyone else's problem. It's not always your problem. I think like there's value in always reflecting back, right? And just looking at, just trying to get feedback for yourself, like in terms of, is this my problem? Is this not my problem? Maybe it's not your problem. Maybe something you can learn from it anyways.
Right.
Like in kind of gauging how far you're willing to go with that. And again, some of that's going to have to come back to how you how you're feeling with that particular situation. But, you know, it's like you said, it's a tricky balance. Yeah.
Big takeaway is that being in touch with your feelings is very, very, very important.
Yes.
Well, we're kind of running into time here, but do you have any last pieces of advice, or like practical steps, or, tips or tricks or whatever that you'd like to share before we kind of sign off here?
Yeah, I guess I'll just again reiterate a few things, right, that we were talking about earlier on. One, your love life doesn't have to look like anyone else's, so you can remove that pressure off of yourself, and really about focusing on you. And I have to be careful when I say focusing on you, because I think, again, that's another thing we can take too far, where a lot of women, we're doing all the personal development work on ourselves, all the inner work on ourselves, and then we just expect that, we're going to become this perfect person for someone else. And we don't realize that, okay, there's all this inner work, but there's also that relational work and that relationship work too. So again, balance, right? But
yes, 100%.
Focusing on you is going to be a good first step. And then you add in kind of understanding men better, and also looking at relationship skills in terms of obviously communication, how even arguing better, how to, how to manage conflict in your relationship, and setting boundaries, another big one. And just remembering that you're awesome. So just on this theme of self-love, right? Even if, especially in the beginning, if we're talking about heartbreak or if things are rocky in your marriage or your relationship, just doing that, even just that exercise, like I said earlier, to look back and reflect on all the things that make you unique. And I always say, like, if that's too hard and, you're not there yet, and pick another word. I just say, I'm awesome. You're awesome.
Yeah. Whatever radiates for you.
For you. Yeah. And then just keep saying it, even if you don't believe it yet, or you haven't, jotted down all the reasons, but eventually, as you keep doing this work, it's all gonna land for you.
It's that feedback loop, for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, and for your expertise. I mean, I know that I definitely learned a lot, which is one of the perks of hosting a podcast and interviewing people. But do you want to let people know where they can find you, where they can work with you, where they can continue learning from you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on. First of all, this was so much fun. This was really, really great. So people can find me. I'm on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel called Mireille Coaching. So you can find me there. I do all these, instructional videos, practical things you can do if you're in a relationship. I still have videos up there on health, because like we said, it's all interrelated. You can find me on Instagram at I am Mireille Nicole, or friend me on Facebook. Also, you can find me there. I have different coaching programs. I work one-on-one, or I do group coaching on specific topics like communicating better, becoming the better offer in love, fighting smarter. So another one that's coming out soon. So you can see me there. Or on Facebook, I have a group called the Happily Ever After Hangout. You can join us there and get some great practical tips for your love life.
I love that. Yeah, I might have to join that one. Sounds fun. Well, yes, thank you so much. And I can't wait to continue to follow you and to learn more from you. And I hope my listeners learned a lot as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. You have been listening to Wine, Dine, and 69. I'm your host, Rachel Dalton, and let's keep talking.